Kia ora koutou. Very sorry about the delay. We had a couple of technical problems, but we're up and going now. So welcome to the Facebook Live event. It is now live of Transparency International New Zealand's the release of the 2020 Corruption Perceptions Index and our set of quarter all about this. So very welcome to you all. My name is Julie Haggie. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Transparency International New Zealand. And with me is Len Cook. Len, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm a statistician. I have been government statistician. I just work as an advisor to Transparency International in New Zealand, just looking at the statistical aspects of the index and how to interpret it.
So I thought and behind the scenes is Chelsea Kane, who's working extremely hard as our tech person tonight. I thought what we're going to do is just have a bit of a chat about the Corruption Perceptions Index, this 2021. And first I thought we'd talk just a little bit about what it is and then talk about where New Zealand is at. Now, if you've been paying attention to the news, you'll see that the big news is that we are number one equal with Denmark again, which is great. The other good part about it is that we've gone up one, as well as being top ranked, first equal, we've gone up 1 point. 1 point isn't hugely statistically significant in the sense of the Corruption Perceptions Index, but it's better than going down, I do think. What the Corruption Perceptions Index is a tool that's developed by Transparency International to look at public sector, at perceptions of public sector corruption. That's corruption by public sector officials and the judiciary. It covers about 180 countries. It is a global index. It's an index that's drawn from 13 independent surveys that are put out by independent institutions. They're very well thought of, each one of them. The Bertelsmann Index, there's the Freedom House Index, there's 13 of them. New Zealand is covered by 8 of those indexes. And so the Transparency International has a method to work out, to even them all up and then average them and come out with a score and a ranking. So that's what I'd say about it. So what else do I need to say? I think I'll hand over to you and talk about a little bit about, New Zealand's been top of the index now, either first or second for a long time. And, why is that? Why are we consistently at the top? Len's going to talk a bit about that.
New Zealand's tended to be at the top rank for the top 3 countries, Finland, Denmark and New Zealand, for over a decade. And in some ways, the fact we're in the top 3 group is perhaps more significant than whether we're the top of it or second in any year, because of the vagaries of any sort of estimation process are likely to bring in some variability. What's interesting is that our trading partners, most of our trading partners except China score pretty highly on the index. China, our largest trading partner, gets just around 50 as an index value, whereas our index value is 88, for example. So quite interesting enough, only one of our trading partners, Singapore, is consistently in the top 10. The rest are apart from China, tend to be in the next TINZ 20. We also score higher, which is interesting, than the 3 countries, Australia, Canada and the United Kingdom, that share the Westminster system of government with us. What of course may be important there is that they are larger countries, that there are perhaps more ways and more things that can cause one-off incidents in a large country that may well appear in an index more likely than us. Interesting enough, nearly all of the components have been generally fairly static, except the World Economic Forum Index went down quite significantly last year from a level that had been around for about nearly 10 years, but it's now popped back again this year to that level. The other thing which is important is quite a number of the measures didn't get carried out in the full year, and one survey didn't get carried out at all. So in some ways, for this year's results, we suspect that there could be a little bit of momentum from last year's results than would normally be in an index where each year is completely independent and covers a full year.
And is that because because when when the survey wasn't able to hold because of COVID-19, they then went back to the previous year's survey.
Yes.
So we're just getting a sort of evening out. And the other thing we were asking Transparency International is are we seeing any any impact from COVID-19? And they've answered no, they can't. At the moment it's too early, and they think it's because of the time period when the data was collected, that is sort of over the last 18 months, and quite a few of them through last year, that they're really not able to actually say that they're not getting the perceptions through, because it will take some time for the corruption to start, people to start perceiving more corruption due to COVID and so on. So that's another impact. They said they're not really seeing that impact coming through. Oh, by the way, if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Is that the right term, Chelsea? Yeah, put them in the chat and we'll answer them as we get to the end, I think.
Perhaps two other little points. One is that the United States dropped from 67th, scoring 67th place to 75 in 2007. Sorry, it just dropped from 18th to 25th, and it scored 67 and then 75 several years before. So the United States has dropped off. The other point that's been made by Transparency International is that some large countries may themselves score quite highly on the corruption index, but do things such as exporting arms, would be my good example, which actually increase the corruption in other countries.
That's certainly the comment of some of the Transparency International chapters from some of those countries that struggle and are really at the bottom of the index. And they say, well, look, we're the receiving countries of corruption a lot of the time. We haven't got the money, but the money's being dealt through the large companies that are coming from those countries, or that are coming from the wealthy countries, which is scoring quite highly. Yeah. So, the other thing I wanted to just talk about was a little bit about some of the questions. You go, but more, getting a little bit more into some of the detail of the sources, and I just thought it's about perceptions, and those perceptions are responded to by business executives usually. So they're asked to talk about things like, what's your impression of corruption? But I'll read some of them. So, for example, the Bertelsmann stifling sustainable governance indicators. Experts are asked to assess to what extent public office holders are prevented from abusing their power for private interests. And people will answer on a scale. And then similarly, another one, I'll give you another one so that people know. There's the Economic Intelligence Unit Country Risk Service asks, are there procedures and accountability governing the allocation and use of public funds? Are there general abuses of public resources? Is there an independent body auditing the management of public finances? So those are the kind of questions that the New Zealand experts through the various surveys are commenting on. So it's not just like, do I think there's corruption happening? It's not just general. It's actually something that's based on would have to depend on their experience and their expertise. So yeah, that's...
Just to follow on that point, it's many of the questions are a test. Is there an independent third party that has a job of checking on governments, such as an Auditor General, an Ombudsman, where that independent third party from government itself actually exists to check on things?
Yeah, that's right. So what I thought I'd talk about a little bit now is about the fact that First is great, and it is a credit to our public service. I mean, we really have to take our hat off to our public service. We are lucky, very fortunate to have a great public service in New Zealand, and all credit to them, particularly that we're sustaining this year on year. And the public service doesn't just come from nothing. It comes from the trust of the public and the expectations of the public. So New Zealanders generally should pat themselves on the back, I think. But that doesn't mean we're immune to corrupt activity in New Zealand, or that we've got enough systems that actually stop that corruption from happening generally. We and Denmark have come out with a statement. It's on our website now, and it'll be on our newsletter. It'll be in our newsletter tomorrow, which is on our website. We've come out and talked together about still the problems. Even the countries at the top of the CPI got our corruption challenges, and the ones that are for New Zealand and Denmark is we don't have a register of publicly available register of beneficial ownership of companies. So that means it's quite hard for the ordinary New Zealand citizens, for journalists and so on, to track what's happening to the money that comes through into New Zealand and sits in companies and is sitting there because sometimes it's used for tax avoidance, sometimes it's used, often legitimate, but sometimes not. We have been a tax haven in the past, so we want to make sure that that isn't happening. The other area is that we've got some quite light legislation around foreign bribery, around facilitation payments overseas and overseas dealings when New Zealanders are working overseas or with overseas companies or businesses, and that's something that we need to put a stop to. And the other area we've got quite weak transparency around our public procurement processes. Now we have got a government tendering process, and that's world-class standard, but the problem is it's the way it's being used. So we've been analysing the data that's come out from, it's been released by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, and that they've been releasing the data on their website. It's available to be analysed, and we have been analysing, which is great to have that. But the problem is what we're finding is very variable performance, especially in things like when the actual tender service runs well, but then the finishing off bit is saying who got the award and how much was it worth. And that's part of the government rules, and it's not being followed regularly as much as not nearly as much as it should. And that includes procurement that's been made under COVID, under emergency procedures, still lacks. Now, your public trust is built on having those things tied off. Right? You give the executive power to an agency because you know they are doing the right thing. So we just need those agencies to step up and do the right thing consistently. That's our main message on that. So I think, do we still need the CPI? What does it give us as a country? What does it do for New Zealand?
I think if we didn't have the CPI, we'd have anecdote and one-off experiences driving people's thoughts. The CPI manages to pull together quite a range of areas, a sort of a summary measure, and it also helps us get placed with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It is an aggregated index. It summarises a huge amount of things, and it depends some elements on its methodology. We know more about, in fact, how it's aggregated and how it's pulled together than some of the individual indexes. But as Julie pointed out, the questions that we've seen, we're quite content that they hit the mark for a lot of the important issues.
So, Chelsea, have we got any questions at all?
No, we have a few comments, one from Mr. Bushell himself saying, well done New Zealand, and one from Peter Kelly saying it's a great outcome and reinforces the quality of our public sector organisations, but you make a good point that we always need to remain vigilant and ensure our processes are robust and continue to evolve.
Oh, he's a wise guy. That's Peter Kelly. He's one of our board members. He's great. So I think we're not too far from the end here. What I wanted to say is if you've got any more questions, please feel free to check out our website. You can join up with our newsletter. You might want to know, this is our latest annual report, and this strapline is our international sort of vision message of sort of the purpose statement of Transparency International, which is holding power to account for the common good. And we think that's a really important role that non-governmental organisations like Transparency International play, and they play it in our democracy, and we're always seeking support and membership from people in New Zealand. So I think we're about done, and I hope you have a good evening or the rest of the evening, and thank you for joining us. So this is Transparency International New Zealand. Thank you.